how can I create narratives within my work that make people see themselves and others more empathetic, more compassionate, see what we have in common rather than focusing on division.
Hello, print friends, and welcome. This is a bilingual podcast, so if you subscribe to us, you'll be getting episodes in English with me, as well as in Spanish with Ronaldo Gil Zambrano. Together, we speak to people around the globe about their practice and passions in the field of print media and multiples. Hello, Print Friend is brought to you by Speedball Art Products, who've been a leading innovator and manufacturer of printmaking products for over 50 years. Speedball's speed screens answer the call to have an easy-to-use way to screen print, no matter your experience level. Whether you're printing at home, studio, or a classroom, these easy-to-use mesh screens allow you to create permanent photographic stencils without the need to mix emulsion or coat a screen. All you need is your design and you are ready to print. Pick up the Speed Screens kit for the most affordable way to get all the materials necessary to print your next masterpiece. There's a link in the show notes. Hey print friends, did you know that Florence, Italy is home to Srisa, a leading institution for art and design education? It offers highly personalized instruction and experiential learning, which meets American university standards for study abroad programs in fine art, liberal arts, and design. Educators who are interested in teaching at Srisa can lead a faculty-led program utilizing its top-notch printmaking facilities in one of the world's most inspiring cities. To learn more, email info@srisa.org. That's SRISA.org. And don't forget to mention the Hello Print Friend podcast for exclusive discounts and perks. This episode is also brought to you by Legion Paper. Legion Paper is a fine art paper company that represents the best papers in the world. They either stock it, source it, or make it. With brands like Stonehenge, Somerset, Coventry, Reeves, Arches, and more, Legion is the best paper resource for every artist and printmaker's needs. Learn more about the variety of papers Legion stocks at www.legionpaper.com. My guest this week is Shepard Fairey. Shepard is an internationally renowned artist known for his iconic graphic works, which wed the aesthetic and the political in endlessly innovative ways. We talk about how the medium of printmaking affected his artistic development, his conscious effort to use his platform for the dissemination of accurate information, what happens when you put up an Andre the Giant billboard across the road from the licensing office that handles his estate, and much more. Hi, Shepard. How's it going?
Hi, Miranda. I'm great. Busy, but good.
Yeah. Thanks for making time for us. I'm really happy we can sit down and have a chat together. I'm a long-time admirer of your work.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
I did an internship at the National Portrait Gallery, and the day I started, they were installing the Obama Hope in that kind of foyer. And I remember it was my first exposure to what I felt was like the big real art world in a meaningful way. And so I feel really connected to that. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I remember being there when they were installing it and the guys wearing white gloves and my assistants and I making fun of how precious they were being when this was a piece that was worked on the floor of my studio with probably a few Converse footprints on it and things like that. But that's the nice thing, that you can be as sort of punk rock about the process and someone else can be as precious about the product.
Yeah, it's that funny sort of journey, the life cycle of a work of art, from the chaos of making to sometimes Christie's with all of the pomp and circumstance of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You've been making prints for decades. How have you seen printmaking technology change, and how has that affected your practice?
I used technology from the beginning because my mom had a Xerox machine for her bed and breakfast reservation service business in the 80s. And the Xerox machine was like the tool of empowerment for zine makers, punk rockers, people who did flyers. Mm-hmm. And it also had the benefit of converting everything to a stark black and white graphic image. So my first screen printing was based on me cutting stencils from Xeroxes I had made, adjusting the brightness contrast to try to get the ideal highlights, shadows, relationship in images, and then cutting a stencil, taping it to the back of a screen, and putting some speedball ink on it and pulling a squeegee. Now, as I got more serious about screen printing when I got to college at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, for people who don't know that term, RISD, but I learned how to use photo emulsion and to create film positives and to do a lot more than just use Xerox style images to add colors. But it was still a very trial and error based process, because I would visualize something, make the separations, then start printing and realize that my visualization was not quite aligning with the reality I was getting. And then I would have to course correct. Once I learned how to use Illustrator as a program, which was well after I was in college, because the computer wasn't really the dominant tool for graphic design until after I had graduated in 92. But once in late 97, I really learned how to use Illustrator. And because it deals with images that are flat color, it translates really well to my techniques of screen printing and stenciling, where you're working with flat color as well. So it allowed me to experiment with how I was going to layer things, the color theory. And then in a lot of ways that made me a better printmaker, because prior to that, if I had an idea that I was pretty sure was going to work based on things I'd done before, then in order not to waste time having to reshoot screens and waste paper that I had printed failures on, because I was also very broke, I would stick with something that I thought was a safe formula for success. Once I learned how to use Illustrator, I could go through a lot of different iterations digitally with no risk at all and decide what worked and what didn't. And the ability to start to develop a file, I'd make my illustrations, scan them, and then start to add color and type. And once I got to something that I thought was decent, I could make a copy of it, and then I could go wild with all the things that, maybe we're going to push it to an even better place. Maybe we're going to fail, but at least I had the decent one on the artboard over here. So that just improved things for me as a printmaker.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And so you were doing print and print-related things pre-RISD. And is that really through skate culture, album art influence?
Punk rock and skateboarding. Yeah, it was, I grew up in South Carolina. It's a pretty conservative, traditional place. I loved to draw from when I was a kid, but I wasn't exposed to anything other than very traditional art, watercolors, oils, acrylics, drawing with charcoal, with pastels. And I enjoyed all those things, but it didn't give me any sense of pride in my identity other than, oh, I can do this fairly well. But that wasn't even cool at all with any of my friends. So I didn't celebrate it. I just did it because I enjoyed it. Then when I got into skateboarding and punk rock, DIY creativity is a currency within that culture. It makes you cooler, which was astounding to me, to all of a sudden be able to be forward and proud about the creative things I could do. And making homemade stencils and to make screens, to make homemade t-shirts, especially when in South Carolina, you couldn't just go to the record store and get a Sex Pistols or a Misfits t-shirt. And so I started making those, and it was, it was a really important thing for me to have that sense of empowerment and pride in making stuff that I could wear as, a canvas of my identity, but also friends who were into those bands would say, oh man, where'd you get that shirt? Can I get one? And so this was the entrepreneurial spark. I'm like, no, I got to keep this one for myself. It's my only one. But next time, when I spend all that time cutting a really meticulous stencil, I'm going to make 3 shirts, and I'm going to keep the best one for myself and sell the other 2 for $5.
Yeah.
so yeah, this is a important moment for me, realizing that, one, printmaking, allowing you to make multiples of things that could be affordable, and a way to to get stuff out into the world, that sense of empowerment was really amazing. And I kept feeding it.
Yeah, the power of the multiple is really real. I think you're speaking to it from the artistic point of view, and this idea that you put all this effort into something and then you get to go see it live out there in multiple iterations. And it has such a long history with politics and being progressive. I often point to the Reformation, if you want to go back that far. The invention of the printing press, the Bible gets translated into the common tongue, shakes the Western history to its core because people are finally getting access to information. And you can pull that through line right through to punk rock. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's quite relevant now that we've come all this way with people having access to information. And yet there was always a process of vetting what ended up proliferating. And now the newest technology means that we're democratized to a point past curation, where it means that there's an abundance of disinformation. And so this is something I keep in mind when I'm working, that do I want to be just adding to the visual noise and the noise of opinions that really aren't justified in having equal footing and equal platform to, say, the New York Times. So I'm always trying to make things that are, I think, quality in terms of my ideas, my aesthetics, and my research for facts and truth in the work, to make sure that I'm not just contributing to sort of the throwaway nature of a lot of things. And everything's got this yin and yang, two sides, where I used to feel like keeping up with the metabolism of culture by making things at a really rapid rate and being clearly concerned with quality, but also quantity, that now I still want to make a lot of stuff, but I want to make sure that in a year, 5 years, I look back at the work and say, that still holds up. That was worth doing.
And I feel like the work that you make is in dialogue with the collective consciousness. Like, you will make images that catch on, and people tend to use them for their own expression as well. And we spoke earlier about the now iconic Obama Hope image. Yeah. You would see that appear. Other people took it, they altered it, they'd add their own message, sometimes positive or negative, sometimes agreeing or disagreeing. And what is that afterlife of an image like for you as an artist for whom that happens? Do you see that as a success, or as part of just being in dialogue with the greater people? Yeah,
I am always working with a few different things in mind. Of course, I like to make art objects that people value, that they want to hang on their wall, that they feel like enriches their life. But if one of my images does nothing beyond serve as a conversation starter based on something that was a viral JPEG, or that was used as a tool of communication by someone through their social media, that is valuable. Because I think that where we go wrong as a species is when the conversation about the narratives of humanity are controlled by too few people that don't have mass well-being in mind. And I always want to feel like I'm trying to counter that with things that really consider the struggles of humanity. I know it sounds pretty pretentious, but I sincerely do care.
Yeah.
And so when something becomes a conversation point, whether it's something I did around the entire Obey campaign about what does it mean to submit or obey, what do we align ourselves with, or the Obama Hope poster, or stuff I did around Occupy Wall Street, or the We the People posters that I did for the first Women's March / the anti-Trump inauguration. Those things going viral really makes me feel good, because they're all causes that I think were important, and some people are gonna use them as a way to subvert it and flip it. And that's great, because that shows that the image got under their skin enough that they felt like they had to respond to it. And obviously what would make me happiest would be if people go, oh yeah, this image is making a really great point. Now I've had an epiphany. I'm going to be kinder. I'm going to make this world better. That's not going to happen for everyone.
Yeah. There's just so much in what you said there. I'm thinking of a couple of different things. I think right now, conservative voices in the United States have been really good at setting the terms on which dialogue happens. They set the terms. They say, you know what's the issue? Immigrants. And then everyone scrambles to have these dialogues about it. Or the issue is trans people. And then everyone scrambles to have these dialogues about it. And it seems like visual artists and musicians are almost the only strong voice that's pushing a different narrative in any kind of successful way.
Yeah, it is really frustrating. Fear is used by the right to stake out the terms of the conversation. And a good example is that for basically since Biden took office, there's been this like, oh, crime is terrible. Biden was down with the defund the police agenda, and now crime is rampant. And immigrant crime, all the intersectional things. Immigrant crime, it's the word. The facts are, statistically, crime's down this year by 16%, and immigrants commit fewer crimes than native-born citizens. So the right is not operating on fact, they're operating on fear and emotion, and yet Democrats find themselves scrambling to defend their record on crime and immigration.
Totally.
It's really hard to break with that, because a lot of people, their natural tendency is not to be hopeful, but to be fearful. And so if you prey on those fears, then they go, oh, you know what? Just to be better be safe than sorry, we better build that wall on the border, or we better hire more police and not give them the oversight that would stifle them in doing all the horrible things they might do. I try to find some emotionally potent counter narrative that is also backed up by facts that I can present when I make my pieces. But what pretty much every psychologist has realized is that facts alone don't change people's opinion, and they don't grab their attention either.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've spoken to in the past using beauty and aesthetic as a gateway drug into what you're trying to say. And I completely understand that. And I think it is incredibly effective. And it's one of the most powerful tools the arts has had since forever, since humans started to think about making things outside of ourselves. And I've always wondered, what is it about an aesthetic experience that sort of softens? What's the actual mechanics that it is happening inside someone when they look at something and they feel themselves open or feel some delight, maybe even before the left side of the brain catches up to what's going on?
I think that it's complicated, but there is definitely a part of us that wants to be hopeful. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more suicide, because life is tough. And what's really stoking our hopes, our euphoric feelings about the potential of what life can offer? And I think that in a superficial way, from just an aesthetic and substance standpoint, something beautiful triggers something that's not just superficial in us. It triggers something deeper in us that's about, are we leaning into hope, or are we going to just be dragged down by fear? And that's part of our evolutionary makeup. I've read a lot of social theory stuff, and I think that what I've come to the conclusion on, based on a lot of reading, is that humans have always had the ability to be savage for survival, but generally when things are going okay, we are not savage unless we're following an extreme narrative that's pushing us to be savage. And in some ways, a lot of what's going on with all the fear-based rhetoric and the brutality of capitalism, we're all being pushed in a more savage direction, even if we don't realize it. And people can compartmentalize. They become very good at Orwellian doublethink, holding two contradictory ideas as equally valid simultaneously. And when you look at the conservative Christian movement is behind Trump, who's displayed behavior that breaks every one of the 10 Commandments, pretty much. He didn't actually kill anyone yet, but he's talked about how he could do it and get away with it. This is just so contradictory. But I accept that, but I'm looking at, all right, how can I create narratives within my work that make people see themselves and others more empathetic, more compassionate, see what we have in common rather than focusing on division. I have to be honest that it took me a long time to get to this point. When I was younger, I loved the myth, independence and uniqueness. The first straw was going to art school, where they made the joke that you're the only one that listens to the Smiths and wears a black trench coat at your high school, and then you go to art school and everybody is that person. And so, you know, you're not unique. And I accept that I'm not unique, I'm not special. I have the ability to make things that are a fusion of a lot of my inspirations and skills I've developed. Same inspiration, same skills a lot of other people have, but that luckily the way it will all coalesce for me will be slightly different and different enough to be recognizable as me, but it doesn't really make me that special, and so I shouldn't feel superior.
Yeah. And when it comes to saying actually how it all coalesces, and you've created a visual vocabulary, I think, in your work that is iconic and recognizable. And what was that process like, where you said, okay, I've got a set of tools now and I can use them in a way that is fruitful for me and fruitful for my practice, and it's a well that I can return to, where I'm not getting burnt out on it, and it's continuing to evolve as well, but still be true to you? Because I think that basically what I'm talking about is an artistic voice, essentially, in more words. But that's something that so many young artists search for. And I'd just love to hear you talk your path to finding it and leaning into it.
Sure. I've never probably had an original thought or idea or aesthetic thing, but I think I'm very good at recognizing in work that inspires me what's giving it some of the appeal, some of the power, or at least I recognize what connects with me. And I do think that if it connects with me, I'm human, it'll connect with other humans. I call it solo apprenticeship, when I'm like, okay, I love Jamie Reed's work for the Sex Pistols. I love Barbara Kruger's artwork. I love Russian constructivism. How did they make something so appealing? Let me see if I can emulate some of the things from that. But then as you find inspiration in several different areas, it mutates, and it's not just derivative of the influences anymore. If you look back at my mid-90s work, it's clearly just me doing my version of Russian constructivism for the most part. There's a little bit of other stuff going on. There's a little bit of Warhol's influence and Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns and Barbara Kruger, like I mentioned. And then, a little smidge of Art Nouveau, things. But it then, as I was emulating other things and my number of influences kept increasing, it would evolve, it would mutate. And then my work starts to really look just like my work. And a lot of the principles aesthetically of reducing things to their most powerful essence and cutting out everything superfluous, that was a big part of it. But then also realizing that sometimes between a very intense, aggressive image that then including things like decorative patterns and frames and motifs would soften the confrontational nature of the image, that all of these things were just little new things I would discover and then experiment with for a while, and then either keep in the quiver but not use as frequently and as I added new things. But this has just been an iterative process for 30 years.
Yeah. And did the medium of printmaking influence that outcome of that end aesthetic? Because obviously printmaking is a part of what you do, but then that look, that vocabulary, it still appears on massive murals as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, printmaking was probably the most influential thing on my aesthetic because I loved printmaking. It was very utilitarian. I could make prints for the street. I could make inexpensive prints to sell. And before I learned how to use the computer, a print wasn't something I had to be so precious with because I could print a few based on the ink colors I had mixed and go, that's not quite right. Let me try this, add this, switch the color altogether, change the orders of the screens. But printmaking lends itself to very graphic images, and also me being broke for the first 10 years of my career, figuring out how to use printmaking in a very efficient way was more economically viable for me. So that's why almost all my work is 1, 2, 3 colors, no more. And luckily that turned into an asset stylistically, because using the same red and black on white paper, red, black, and gold on white paper, then through series of images became recognizable. So it's the style of the art and the color palette, but printmaking lent itself to that cohesion as well, which I think really helped me, especially pre-internet, when really people could only become familiar with my work by experiencing it firsthand or in a magazine. And now I think that an artist can ascend more quickly because of social media tools, but maybe the ability to ascend quickly is going to prevent them from having the discipline to really develop a style that they stick with. I don't always think that consistency in style is ideal or necessary. I think that David Bowie's material sounds like David Bowie, but it jumps around stylistically a lot. I also happen to love the Ramones, where every album sounds the same.
Yes.
It depends, but I'd say that my work is definitely somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is definitely related to that, because it has to do with your arc and that message and how it evolves. I'm curious about what the transition is like for an artist who's gone from making work in this really punk rock way, making work in art school, to making work in the public eye. And so it goes from who's going to see this? My mom, my friends, maybe my professors, to there are a million people who follow me on social media. There's more people out there who encounter my work in other ways, and all those people are going to receive that. And as a creative person, and as someone I think who's really interested in the human experience and in the way humans experience your work, what was that like?
The growth of my audience was slow, and it is probably good that it was slow, because I needed to be more thoughtful and to mature some, recognizing that the work I was doing could potentially influence people, and that there's a responsibility that comes with that. I was very punk rock and rebellious when I was young, and I still am in a lot of ways, but I'm a little bit more thoughtful, not quite as reckless and spontaneous about some of the things I'd say, because audience matters. If I'm speaking to people who are insiders in a lot of the culture that I'm into, they might get certain cues that the broader public is not going to get. And so I need to consider how I can make sure that I'm properly communicating to everyone, not just people that I have an inside language with already. And one of the things that I wasn't prepared for when the internet started to pick up steam and there were comment sections and chat rooms was just how mean people can be. It took me a long time to not take it personally. I now look at it like, it's very unfortunate that this person is lashing out at people they don't know. They must have a life that's not really fulfilling. How do I maybe make a breakthrough with them and definitely don't fight back in a way that makes them dig their heels in? But that's not going to succeed with everyone. So I had to learn how to have thicker skin and just ignore some of it. But I think like many creative people, I experience the paradox of you have to be very sensitive to make and to feel, then be inspired to make, then to share, and then you are confronted with a lot of meanness when you're sensitive. It can be tough.
Yeah.
But I also, when I take a deep breath, clearly understand that I get to make a living as a creative person. This is miraculous. I'm very fortunate. It shouldn't be as miraculous as it is.
Yeah.
Creativity really benefits society. It should be valued more. For where I am as an artist, if I were in tech, I'd be one of those people figuring out how to colonize Mars. But creative people just don't get rewarded financially or appreciated in that way. And this is not, I live comfortably. I'm very lucky to live comfortably. But my point is that I want all creative people to have it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think would have to change for that to happen?
Having programs in schools from a young age that not only teach music and art and theater, but also explain to people that whether they're playing a video game or watching a TV show or looking at traditional art or listening to music, that all these things that create culture, these are generated by creatives. And in fact, one of the few things the US manufactures these days is culture. We export it around the globe. And I read a statistic from about 10 years ago that for every $1 in investment in the arts, there's an $8 return to the economy.
I believe that, yeah.
So investing in the arts at a educational and government level, when I go to places like Germany and there are artists who are getting stipends for all sorts of projects, and one of my murals in Munich was largely funded by a grant from the city with the mandatory that it addressed the need to evolve away from fossil fuels, which is already top priority for me anyway. So this was very symbiotic. Government, I think, in other places has figured it out. And we've had it in the past here in the US. During the Depression, FDR created all sorts of programs for artists.
WPA, some great prints came out of it.
The Works Progress Administration, exactly. Yeah. So, there's, I feel like the arts are underappreciated. I'm quite biased towards that realm, obviously, but maybe some of that money that's going into building weaponry could be reused for something better.
Yeah, absolutely. We're almost out of time, so I've got one more question for you here. And it's so a few years passed between 1989, when you coined the now iconic Andre the Giant stickers, and Andre's death. Do you know if he was ever aware of the role you sort of played in his underground cultural phenomenon?
I don't know if Andre was aware, but I do know that around 1998, Andre's daughter contacted me through my website, and she just asked me what the backstory was on the project. And she lived in Seattle, and she knew some people that knew me, and she said, some of your friends say you're a good guy. My mom really hates the thing that you're doing, but I like it. And I said, it started off as an inside joke with a skateboard friend, and I think that your dad's a really fascinating, compelling person, but it's really not so much about who he was as the power of a mysterious image. And I've evolved it away. I don't use his closer likeness from the original sticker in any of my artwork anymore. But I'd be glad to send you one of every print I make. And she was like, oh, that's really nice of you, but it would just irritate my mom. So don't worry about it. And then that was it.
Yeah.
And then in around, I think 2001, I had put up a old school cutout Andre head on a billboard, and it happened to be just coincidentally right across from the licensing offices of the people that controlled Andre's estate. And they hit me up and said, hey, this thing's on a billboard. You can't do that anymore. And I was like, I didn't get paid for that billboard. That's just something that is promoting Andre that you guys are probably going to benefit from. But they said, you have to agree that you won't do anything with that image. And I had evolved to what I call the icon face and the icon star gear anyway. And they were like, those things are transformative enough. They're far enough away from a likeness, so you can just keep doing that. And that was great. So we coexist, but I'm always very happy to tell the story of how I was, inspired to make the original sticker, and how I do think that Andre is very fascinating, because some people saw him as intimidating while other people saw him as sympathetic. Mm-hmm. And he is like a Rorschach test that everyone's projection onto Andre the Giant and onto my sticker is a reflection of their own personality. And that's a really fascinating thing to explore.
Absolutely. I have a very vivid memory of seeing the first one. I was actually in Seattle. It was the first big city that I ever moved to. And I found it completely beguiling, because it had that message of there's some sort of underground, unseen, esoteric force going on here. And it was so exciting to me, because it had that feeling of possibility. And I think it's that really special time in your life when you're 18 and you're living away from home for the first time. And it just was it hit me really emotionally, and I remember seeing it on the streets of Seattle. So it had that, I think, intended effect on me for sure. And yeah, it's just been so lovely over 20 years later to sit down with you and have this conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And the last thing I'll say is that the sticker unlocked something for me about the possibility of not being a spectator in life, but being a participant. And if it can do that for anyone else, it's really meaningful for me. So it's really great to hear that from you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And that's our show for this week. Join me again in 2 weeks' time when my guest will be Ernesto Llorena. We talk about his incredible passion for screen printing and political activism, his introduction to the art world by watching his father and grandfather paint cars, and working in Los Angeles doing images of Hollywood royalty like Lily Gladstone. You won't want to miss it. If you like today's episode, we have a Patreon where you can help support this podcast and get bonus content, like Shop Talk Shorts with past guests. But the very, very best thing you can do to support this podcast is listen, rate, follow, and don't forget to share with your fellow print friends around the world. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you in 2 weeks.